Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changelog, where we explore the latest updates, enhancements, and changes to New Relic itself. In each episode, we dig into new features and functionalities as told by the people who envisioned, shaped, and even coded them. We discuss the inspiration and the data behind the development, as well as common use cases and applications. So, my name is Daniel, and I am one of New Relic's amazing developer advocates. And joining me this week are David Hersh, Senior Director of Product, Matthew Peterson, Senior Principal Product Director at Codestream, part of New Relic, as well as Andrea Sy, Senior PMM. So, can we all go and introduce ourselves? David, who are you?
Well, Dave Hersh. I run the Codestream team here at New Relic. As you said, came over via acquisition a year and a half ago. And as we'll discuss shortly, I'm a startup guy at heart. A year and a half into my New Relic journey, it's been exciting to operate as a little developer-oriented startup within the larger New Relic ecosystem. And what we're doing to bring observability into the daily practice of software developers is it's truly new and unique, and it's what gets me going in the morning.
That's awesome. Matt, who are you?
Sure, Matt Peterson here, also a senior director at New Relic. My focus is on full lifecycle observability, and Codestream is a huge part of that. So I work quite a bit with David Hersh, but there's also features and functionality outside of Codestream that I focus on as well, that kind of attaches to our primary New Relic One product as well. As far as my background, I too spent a good decade in startups at just about every stage of venture capital, everything from bootstrap to hundreds of millions of dollars raised. And then also prior to New Relic, I spent a good deal of time at Salesforce working with some of their biggest customers.
That's awesome. Andrea, who are you finally?
Hi, so I'm Andrea. I'm a senior product marketer here at New Relic. I've been here for about 6 months, so I think I just celebrated my 6 monthly like a few weeks ago, so I'm really excited about that. Prior to this, I've had about a decade of experience working across tech, so anything from like a very small 20-person startup to big corporate HR focused organizations. I've done it all. I've always been more at the customer facing seat. So that's been anything from like account management, partnership management, product management, even to some level, and finally landing at product marketing. So a lot of the stuff I do here is product market for products like Codestream and make sure that enough buzz and awareness is generated every time a feature launches, making sure I deliver all of those assets accordingly, both for field and for external customers. And of course, making sure that there is some attributable adoption after these launches. So fingers crossed with Codestream. I hope like everything goes well, especially with this changelog episode.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll go well since all of us are involved. So today we're going to be talking about Codestream, which delivers observability to developers right where they work, which is their IDE. So Codestream lets you see how your applications are performing as you write them, giving you a live view of all the golden signals. In addition, Codestream simplifies developer workflows by bringing the tools you use every day like GitHub, Jira, Slack, all together in your IDE so you don't have to lose focus. So enough about a general description about Codestream. Like we have the founders here, and the part of the startup before New Relic acquired them. So can you tell us about how Codestream came about and what motivated you to start creating the product?
Sure. Love talking about that. About the history of Codestream, you really need to start with the history. We're a group of guys that went to school together at Carnegie Mellon a million years ago. After college, we all cut our teeth at corporate jobs, investment banks, IBM, consulting shops. But then in the mid 90s, we started getting the entrepreneurial itch, and a favor for a friend turned into our first business in the fantasy sports industry. We were the first to bring fantasy sports online in a compelling way. Peter Bazaris, who's now an SVP here at New Relic, he's got a favorite quote from Henry Ford. It goes, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." And that's what this fantasy sports industry was like in the mid 90s, people bringing it online by building faster horses, which in this context meant something that looked like a spreadsheet. On the other hand, we built a product that was focused on the social experiences because we understood that that's the reason why people played fantasy sports, being able to trash talk your friends. So message boards, user-generated content, all things that seem very quaint today, but were groundbreaking back in 1996. A few years after selling that business to CBS, we got into the social networking space. In the nascent days of that industry, we were actually the first social network to have a newsfeed. And because we used our own social network as our internal means of communication for running the business, that led directly into our third startup, a business messaging service called Glip that launched just a few months before Slack. Either good or bad timing, depending on how you look at that. We sold Glip to RingCentral and married their cloud-based telephony service, creating a unified messaging platform. And then finally, from there, we created Codestream. In many ways, a logical conclusion to our messaging journey, bringing collaboration into the IDE and making it contextual to the code. And that, of course, brings us here to where we are today. We're now part of the New Relic family because Codestream lives where the developer lives, in the IDE, of course. And we're the vehicle for delivering observability to developers and making it part of their daily practice. And that's us in a nutshell.
I was actually really curious about Codestream's history myself, right? Especially since I was the PMM assigned to help you guys out. So are there any, could you share any insights on goals you prioritized when you went about creating Codestream, its user experience, and the experience you wanted for developers? And also, like, were there any barriers and breakthroughs that you felt like really influenced Codestream's development trajectory and like how it got here today?
Sure. Well, the original goal for Codestream was actually quite simple. We just wanted to get developers talking about code more frequently, especially earlier in the development process, the whole shift left mentality. Today, most code discussion happens in the context of a pull request, which is great, but it's also way too late. Generally speaking, by the time you get to the PR, the work is complete and ready to merge. If you need to course correct, this is literally the most expensive time to have to do it. And it's also limiting because you can only discuss the lines of code that actually changed. What about the rest of the code base? So that was our mission in life, just get developers talking about code early in the development process. Of course, Codestream grew from there, the ability to review work in progress code and also incorporate a lot of the tools developers use on a day-to-day basis in order to simplify their workflow, keep them in the IDE. And that to some degree was born out of necessity, but it was sort of a fortunate happenstance because you don't discussing code does not happen at the same cadence that you have discussions on Slack, right? You may have a conversation or two about code each day, or even every few days, whereas you're chatting away on Slack all day long. So we connected that collaboration with all of the workflow tools, and that really led us to where Codestream is today.
Awesome. So I think that was a really, really awesome overview into what Codestream does and how it was founded. So why should customers appreciate New Relic's and Codestream's new features versus just doing it themselves? And also, how does Codestream differentiate New Relic from our competitors?
Let's see. Well, in terms of doing it themselves, certainly there are some aspects to what Codestream does that they could do themselves. A motivated developer could go to New Relic on the web on a regular basis to see their system level telemetry, to see how the services built from the code that they write are performing. But the reality is that most developers don't do that. Only the specific few who are explicitly tasked with that really make that a habit. But now New Relic brings that telemetry right to them inside the IDE. So making it dramatically simpler and easier for telemetry to be part of their daily lives. But other things are completely new. And, as we get into the demo part, you'll see this firsthand. But, if you want telemetry at the method level in your editor, if you want to be able to navigate a stack trace, associated with an error inside your IDE, we're the only ones connecting telemetry to the code in the IDE in a really compelling way.
I think to add to that as well, right? Like that's the emphasis on first movers, delivering observability to developers into their daily workflows, via the IDE. But I think it's also about combining that with, reducing the need to context switch. So that's therefore improving their productivity, right? And it's also providing them all of the contextual knowledge they need and information they need within that area, within that space, instead of getting lost in like Slack or emails and wasting time, essentially. So yeah, I think like Dave really gave a good intro as to why people should care and like how we're different. And I'm sure in the demo, as he mentioned, like a lot of the features here are definitely leading in the industry, I would say, and definitely like new concepts that will probably need to be integrated into developers' current daily workflows. So yeah.
Ultimately, it's about not burying your head in the sand, about proactively making sure your code is performing in production and not just waiting for a customer report to show up in Jira or somebody from ops to come knocking on your virtual door. Address problems more quickly and prevent problems from happening in the first place. These are the kind of outcomes that any development team would want to strive for.
Yeah, that's awesome. So can you show us what you've been working on? Like, I'd love to see this demo.
I would love to show it to you. I live to demo. All right, so what we're looking at here is the Codestream extension inside of Visual Studio Code. There's Codestream at the left. And before we get to the star of the show, I want to point out the observability section here in Codestream. And what this section does is it gives the developer kind of a big picture view that they generally don't get today. How is the service that's built from the code that I'm responsible for, how is that service performing? So, the golden metrics, we'll expand that so you can have a look here. Service level objectives, vulnerabilities, errors, kind of all sorts of things that are both actionable and, giving you this picture that you're generally not used to seeing today. So that's great. It brings it into the developer's world in a way that they're just, nobody's doing today. But today is all about code level metrics. So let's look at the star of the show. So imagine you come into work one day and you've got to fix a bug in this section of the code, or you need to do a refactor. And as part of that, without having to seek it out, right there staring you in the face is how that code is performing in production. And you can click on this code lens and see those golden metrics visualized over time with some nice charts. And you can, of course, click through to the APM service summary page on New Relic if you want to do a deep dive. And you can also switch the service for which you're seeing golden metrics. For example, if you've got a lower environment instrumented, you could take a look at how that code is performing in your QA environment or your staging environment. And again, the whole idea here is to bring this notion of informed development into the developer's world. Let's go ahead and let's kind of extend this idea into the code review process. So imagine you've got a pull request assigned to you, and you're using Codestream's in IDE pull request integration, so you can review the PR right here inside your editor. And if you have code level metrics configured, you'll see those code lenses right here inside the PR diff. And again, the idea here is to inform the code review process. So if you're looking over a teammate's changes and you can see they're working in code that's maybe not performing so well in production, and if they didn't address those performance issues as part of the work at hand, maybe you send the pull request back to them, for some additional work. Make sure that the performance issues are being addressed. And one thing I'll preview for you, what we're working on right now is anomaly detection for code level metrics. So it's very cool that we're able to tell you how this code is currently performing, what the error rate, throughput, and average duration is. But imagine if we could tell you, hey, the error rate in this particular method is up 73% since your last release, or the response time is down 42% since your last release. It's taking this information and making it super actionable for you so that you can, again, be very proactive about how you address performance issues. And with that, that's code level metrics.
This is really awesome. It's really cool to see metrics from production and staging environments directly in context with your code. I think that is really, really cool. So now that we've gone through what is possible in Codestream today, what's next for Codestream? Like, where do you guys see the future of Codestream going?
Maybe I'll let Matt chime in on that one.
Yeah, sure. Dave just mentioned one big aspect, which is going to be code level metrics anomaly detection. So essentially, how can we expand and make those metrics that are coming over to your methods more actionable? So for instance, you can envision a world where we tell you your top 10 worst performing methods in production, right? So as opposed to sort of it being up to a developer to figure out where those are, we're going to actually guide you and say, hey, here's methods that don't look right to us, whether that's they have a high error rate or they're running slowly. Maybe you should take a look at these because production's saying that things aren't going well on these. Similar to that, we're also going to introduce a collection of comparison features. The first big one is going to be what we're calling release comparison, which literally allows you to compare a potential release candidate that's coming through your lower environments against production. And the cool thing about that is a lot of our big incidents that we see today always happen around a release, right? So you go, you release, something unexpected happens during that release, whether it was something you missed in testing or configuration issue. So our goal with release comparison is to try and catch that on your release before it hits production, right? So you can envision a world where in staging, you can run this report and we're going to single in on the areas of code and blocks of code that we see that are different on this release and are performing differently in the lower environments than your current production release performed. And so this really opens up the door to help us avoid a lot of those outages and issues that occur during a release. Because normally an outside of that is it's a bad customer experience and you end up having to roll the release back and kind of reset and redo the whole release again. So we're going to help kind of introduce some features to avoid that. Similar to that, we also just released vulnerability management as a GA feature at New Relic. What's pretty cool is we've integrated that into Codestream. So if you are leveraging our vulnerability management tool, we're actually going to have those results shown directly in your IDE. So again, this is going to help you find security issues in your code. And those are also introduced as part of the PR process. So if you're doing a data-driven code review, we're going to actually let you know, hey, maybe you're using a method that has a known security vulnerability, and that might just be something that you're not aware of, right? And so let's have that discussion at the point of that PR so we can fix and resolve it early, versus today, a lot of those security issues make it all the way to production until a security team catches them in production. And now you're sort of scrambling to try and resolve that problem. And, while it's still out there in production, a potential security hole for your company. And then finally, something I'm pretty excited about that ties into the full lifecycle vision is this concept of teams. So across New Relic, we're going to introduce the idea of teams. And so this is, again, broad-based, expanding us from thinking about just ops personas. So classically, we'd be focused on trees and sysadmins to everyone in your team. So that's your developers, your managers, your executives. And so kind of our first step is constructing those team relationships. But then our next step is we'll actually be able to trend and track how teams are performing. So you could imagine, hey, is our team doing really, really well at things like tracking our vulnerabilities? Are they constantly going down over time? And also things like, all those code level metrics, right? Are you responding to those, or are your methods performing worse and worse over time? So you can get a feel for overall team performance. And finally, what'll be cool with that is we'll actually be able to compare different dev teams at your company. So you might be able to look at dev team A and compare it against dev team B and see what's team A doing that team B could learn, and maybe what are some areas that both teams are failing and that they can improve. So that'll be not only kind of a manager executive feature, but also we'll start tying into New Relic's recommendation engine, where we can actually start giving you recommendations to say, hey, maybe you should release more frequently or less frequently if you're having issues a lot of the times with releases. So all of that's going to kind of build together to build this story, and Codestream's the center of all that.
That's so exciting, and I just can't really wait to see how Codestream brings more of the cutting-edge features that New Relic is releasing directly to the developer in their IDE. So now that we have done all of that, it's time for the funnest part of this episode, which is the lightning round of Changelog. So basically, you get a couple minutes to each tell our audience what you would like our audience to know. And if you don't have anything specific to Codestream that you want to tell, you can just tell a fun fact or whatever you want our audience to know unrelated to Codestream. So Andrea, it's your turn.
Well, wow, so much pressure. But I think for me, the key takeaway here that I'd like to sort of emphasize is shifting left or like delivering observability to developers and inserting that into their daily workflows isn't necessarily the easiest thing, right? But this is also a sign for us as New Relic to be there and that we're here and we're ready to partner with you, right? Our customers to make sure that we equip you with the right tools like Codestream to ensure that we're guiding you through that process, right? Where observability will now fit into these daily parts, daily tasks that developers have to face, and make sure that the experience is smooth and the experience is easy. So it's not easy, but we are here to make it easy, right? And we're hoping that the product we deliver will ensure that process and ensure the smoothness of it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that. Dave, what's your lightning round?
I guess I'll build on that to some degree. Doing something new and different, totally new and different, can be extremely exciting, but at the same time, very challenging. Back in 2004, did anyone think they needed a service to make it really easy for them to share photos of what they were having for lunch with absolutely everybody they knew in the world? Of course not. But it turns out they did. And well, maybe the world is not a better place for it, but there it is. Now, that may be a terrible analogy, but in some ways, we're in the same situation with observability for developers. Do people up and down the engineering food chain realize that every single developer could benefit from having observability be part of their daily routine? Maybe not yet, but my mission in life is to change that. So I would encourage engineering managers to really kind of embrace this new way of thinking about observability and the role it plays, not just for the privileged few developers, but for all developers, every single developer on their teams and their organizations.
That was great. And finally, last but not least, Matt, what's your lightning round?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I build on what both Dave and Andrea said, that there's really no excuse for developers to not be interested in how their code is performing in production. And that's something that Codestream gives you with ease. Classically, the reason developers don't do that is because there can be a real silo between operations and development. And so this is an opportunity to break through that silo and give developers a lot more control to understand and know how their code's running in production. And I'd add to that, as sort of an offering to any of our listeners out there, we are running a full lifecycle early access program right now at New Relic, and essentially that's allowing your company, your team, to partner directly with myself and Dave as we solve these hard problems, and more importantly, as we work through our roadmap. We don't want to be building these types of cutting edge features in a box. We want to be working directly with you and with your company, and so we want you to help us with this, right? These aren't things where it's just, hey, me and Dave think it's cool, so everyone should think it's cool. We want these to be things where your company is excited about it and it's really solving the problems that you're seeing day to day. So I think we will be able to, along with this recording, post some ways. We've got a form we can share out there, so you can give your info if you'd like to be involved in that program. But we're always looking for dev teams out there who have interest in this and kind of want to be on this cutting edge revolution as observability enters every single stage of the software development lifecycle.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks so much for that. So yeah, that is our show. Thanks everyone for joining. And if you're a developer out there, please try out Codestream. It's a great way for you to start thinking about observability earlier in the development process and get all of your valuable observability data directly in your IDE. So yeah, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey there.
Bye.
Okay.